welcome back to It's Too Late to Apologize Book Reviews. I'm Stella, and today we're doing something a little different. Today I'm going to be answering a couple of your questions about what is in the bottle, and I'm doing a book tag. So I had a couple of decanters to refill, and I thought I'd take this opportunity to answer a few questions. So what's usually in my decanter or bottle is some Irish whiskey. Now, disclaimer, I am not the most well-versed in Irish whiskey. All I know is what I like and what I gravitate towards. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. So here we go. I usually have by my desk a decanter of some kind or bottle of my favorite sipping Irish whiskey. So this right now, what I enjoy drinking is a combination of two different whiskeys. A combination of Kirkland brand Irish whiskey. Yes, there's Costco Irish whiskey. Honestly, if you've never tried this stuff, I highly recommend. For the price per ounce, I don't know that it can be beat for the smoothness that you get. Whenever I have a friend who brings me a bottle of Irish whiskey, because they know me and my husband both like Irish whiskey, I always sit down and do a blind taste test. And everybody, for the most part, unless it's a very expensive bottle of Irish whiskey, this has always come on top. It's beaten Jameson, it's beaten Proper 12, it's beaten Wiser's. I mean, it's not that difficult to beat Wiser's, but it is delicious. And so my favorite current trick is I do half Kirkland Irish whiskey and I mix it with half Crown Royal salted caramel whiskey. So this is a Canadian company, and this is not Irish whiskey, but this on its own I find a bit on the sweet side. So what I like to do is mix 50-50 of these two in a bottle, and it is perfection for me. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And there you go, restocked, ready to enjoy. So, drink number one. Now, drink number two is a whiskey mixture that I really enjoy. It's gonna go in this guy. But now, the inspiration for this drink was a limited edition barrel-aged cocktail created by Park Distillery. So it's a Canadian distillery. And they made these little batches of this Alpine Martinez. And it's delicious. It is so good just on a bit of ice. And it rests in oak barrels. And the ingredients for this are Alpine dry gin, Luxardo I don't know how you say this properly. Luxardo Sangue Morlocco cherry liqueur and Park orange bitters. So that's all that's in here. Now, this is a gin drink, and I do enjoy my gin, but because of the oakiness in this drink, you just can't get it from a gin. So I have turned to making this drink with whiskey to try to get that flavor. And I mean, I love whiskey, so I mean, it works anyways. But if you want to make this, you can go ahead and just make it with gin as well. It's still delicious, although it doesn't taste quite the same as this does. So I've been trying to make a version of this drink because this little bottle is far too expensive. It's ludicrous. So I had to make my own homemade version of it because I enjoy it enough. So how I've come to make this, you can't really see this. Anyways, how I've come to make this is I would take 20 ounces of whiskey. All right. So we got 20 ounces of whiskey. Next, I'm going to use the Morloco. This stuff. This is the stuff. This is hard to pronounce. Luxardo cherry sangue morlaco. I can assume Luxardo cherry sangue morlaco. Morlaco? I don't know. This stuff. I don't know. This stuff. Now, this stuff's hard to find, admittedly. So there's another option should you choose to forego this. But since we have it, I'm going to use it. 3 ounces. And then we got orange bitters. I put about 30 drops. Basically one full dropper of this. Mm. And there you have it. And there you have it. So another way that you can do this is if you can't find this stuff, this Luxardo stuff, what I've done in the past, it doesn't taste exactly the same, but it's a close second. I will use this McGuinness cherry whiskey and some Di Serono. So instead, I'll do like 2 ounces of Di Serono and about an ounce of this cherry whiskey together to get something approximating tasting kind of like this. It doesn't taste exactly the same, but it gets the same kind of hint of it. So there you go. Now, some other things about whiskey or drinks. The thing about whiskey is if you're new to drinking whiskey, or you want to get it, you're interested in, or maybe you drink in a lot of whiskey or whatnot, there are different accessories to whiskey that you can get. There are things like these whiskey stones that you can get. I'm not a big fan of these. They just don't get your drink cold enough. And then they whack you in the nose. But anyway, so I find that they just don't get your drink cold enough. My number one would be ice. But then I've also come across, and I haven't tried these yet, these are like stainless steel, and I'm not sure if they have a liquid inside or if it's just solid metal, but I have hope for these in that I feel like there's going to be a better heat transfer than there is with the stones because these are more conductive without watering down your drink. So I'm going to give those a go. Now, I just made these 2 drinks, but let's talk about it. And I've got my favorite glass bottom whiskey glass here to have a drink with you guys. And so I was talking a little bit about maybe if you're new to whiskey, not sure where to start. It's kind of tough. I'm not exactly sure. I'm no expert, but I can tell you a couple other whiskeys that I've been enjoying. I just finished this bottle not long ago, as you can tell. But this is actually a really good one. It's called Writer's Tears. This is not too expensive for a bottle of whiskey. I mean, it's more expensive than a bottle of Jameson, but it is very, very smooth. Like, it is so smooth, it has a bit of fruitiness, but is so incredibly smooth you don't even need ice in it. You can drink it without ice. It is triple distilled, and it is not oaked at all. So it has a very clean flavor. It's almost so smooth that it has not a lot of personality. So while I really enjoyed this, it wouldn't be necessarily my go-to. I like a little bit of personality, but if you're new to whiskey, you might really enjoy this. It might be a nice place to start. Or if you prefer things that are unoaked or don't have the flavors of like bourbon casks or sherry casks or any of those sorts of additions to the flavor of your whiskey, you might really like this. So there's that. Another one that I've picked up that is quite new to me is Glendo. Glendo? I'm not sure how you say that. But this is double-barreled Irish whiskey, and it's first aged in bourbon barrels and then finished in sherry barrels. And this is delicious. So I'm going to serve myself some of that. Test these stainless steel cubes. Let's see how it goes. But I really enjoyed this, and I was really shocked because this is actually a very well-priced bottle of whiskey here. So it's some really good Irish whiskey. It's getting full. It's getting full. All right. What I'm going to do is I was tagged ever so nicely by Greeks, etc. in his The Edge of Reading tag. And it's an original tag that was created by him. So I'm going to link that video in the description box below for those of you to check it out. So I want to thank him for tagging me. It was a really interesting tag, and I'm sorry that I'm getting to it so late, but better late than never. So give me your own definition of reading or use mine. Reading is the act of interpretation of symbols that systematically put together in a certain sequence allow the reader to extract meaning from them in an active form of creation that can develop into complex narratives. So that's a very interesting definition. And I can already see where I agree with this, but I think that not all interpretations lead to complex narratives. So I would say that there's different levels to reading and different purposes behind reading. But otherwise, I agree with this definition, so I'll go with it. Number 2, given your chosen definition, are reading and interpretation the same thing? If not, in what way do they differ? Well, there we go. I should have just read a little further. All right, so given your chosen definition, are reading and interpretation the same thing? I don't think they are the same thing. I think they're related to each other, just as in being farsighted and nearsighted are still sight. They are different forms and have different focus lengths, if you know what I mean. So they're focused on different things, you know. So whereas I think reading, where you're interpreting symbols to grasp some sort of understanding of what it is that you're reading, there can be understanding at a very low level of interpretation. But then when we get into what you would, you know, as is said here, complex narratives, I think that goes beyond. This is interpretation to a different level or a different degree, in my perspective. So it's like the difference in my mind between small talk and like a deep, complex conversation. You know, like you can read something and it's very surface and literal, you know, but to extract a larger view or a macro versus micro view of that topic or what you're looking into, or depending on what meaning you are looking for, really changes the reading experience. So it's this interesting idea of reading what's there, but then interpretation also deals with the reader and the creative response or what the reader is bringing to the interpretation, which changes this experience, if you get my drift or what I'm what I'm perceiving it as. So I think there is a difference between reading and interpretation, even though in a manner they are doing similar things where they are reading symbols and deriving meaning from those symbols, but they're reading completely different things. And of course, we know that as readers, in that you can read a book very literally, and by reading that book in a literal sense, you get one story. Whereas if you were to read it and interpret it in like a deeper manner, where you're taking the metaphorical and, so maybe you're superimposing the metaphorical and looking for other links that tie to each other within the story, you could derive a very different story from reading the same thing, right? So I think there are there's a difference between a literal reading and the complex narrative that you can derive from the metaphor and the other intentions that can be planted subtly in the book, or, in whatever manner, whatever thing you are reading, right? So number 3, are there any practices that you consider reading that would fit that or other definitions of reading? Well, yeah, basically everything you do as a human being is some sort of reading, right? So interpretation of all the senses that we have. So when you hear a song, you are interpreting that music and it emotes a feeling within you of happiness or adventure or sadness. And so, when you listen to music, when you read weather patterns, when you read the geology of the rocks, and you can see the history of like the earth in the geology of that patch of ground. There's stories or history or interpretations and meaning everywhere that you look. You can get home and see the state that your house is in and sort of interpret what happened based on what was left in what places and what was quickly done or left behind. Everything is interpretation of everything. So of, obviously language, of body language, of, even the flow of traffic. Why is this road busier than it usually is? Well, maybe there's some road closure somewhere, or there's it's the long weekend and everybody's rushing off to see their families or travel to other cities to visit or to vacation or whatever the case may be. There's literally, you can read everything. And I don't know, I've always found that extremely intriguing. Is there an ideal reading experience for you? What is it? Is there a book that represents it? An ideal reading experience. So I guess this just depends on what your interests are at that moment of time when you're asked a question like this. I guess for me, what I'm really enjoying right now is diving deep into or trying to get better at analyzing books. And so I've really been enjoying books that you can get really deep into the analysis of. And so what I've been really enjoying recently is a lot of Cormac McCarthy, because his books you can read, I found you can read over and over again and find different things every single time. And the story changes every single time that you do read it. And so there's so much to dissect and get out of it. Another book that's like that is Moby Dick. That's one of my favorite books. And there's just so much, it's such a deep, layered reading experience. And so something like that is my ideal reading experience right now. But, there are days where I just want something that is immersive and enjoyable, which isn't to say that, Moby Dick isn't enjoyable, but it's a very different reading experience. Sometimes you just want to go on autopilot and go on an adventure, and that's also extremely enjoyable and satisfying. So it depends on whatever I might be in the mood or looking or seeking at the time. So right now, that ideal reading experience is sort of getting deep in the weeds of analysis. So that's what I'm liking right now. So if there is such a thing as an ideal reading experience, it follows that there is a scale of value to reading. What is at the bottom? What is at the bottom? Well, I don't know. I think there's somewhat a place for everything. But for me, what's always at the bottom is flat characters, no exploration into the psyche or the personality of those characters. That for me would be the bottom of that. Although it isn't to say that that couldn't be executed well by a skilled artist or a writer. So, but for the most part, the ones that fall flat are two-dimensional characters. Is there a book on that bottom that you love or enjoyed as much as those on the top? I can't think of one. I can't think of one. Let's see how this is going. I think I'm liking those stones a little better. Better than the stone whiskey stones. I think those stainless steel ones are doing better. Is reading, as the art of associating symbols and creating meaning out of them, a predecessor of language, or does it come after as a consequence of those languages? No, I think the reading has to come first. Because if you aren't already actively reading, or which is also brings interpretation into it, then there's no creating a language without looking for the meanings behind symbols, or trying to interpret symbols. Reading has to come before language. Is everything that can be read with meaning a language? I think so. There's the language of the stars. There's the body language, as I already had mentioned. There's everything's a language. Literally everything. If you pay attention closely enough, I think everything can be interpreted in some manner or another. So just like every single sense is interpreting something, everything is a transmitter, right? Mention a few languages that defy the conventional conception of what a language is. Could a book be written in any of those languages? Well, Well, I guess you could write a story with photos, right? With photographs. I mean, that's what comic books are to a certain degree. If they didn't have any language in them, you definitely could. What else? I mean, there's also music books. You could write a story with music if the person who's reading is trained or knows how to read that. I think there are several languages you could use. Definitely a language is the organic chemistry. Organic chemistry is a language all on its own, and yeah, you could perhaps write a story about that using organic chemistry and even just the chemical compositions of compounds through reactions and quantities of those reactants, and what you'll end up with reagent and or even just the final product, and walk your way back to what started that whole complex equation of reactions. I mean, you could do that. That'd be a type of language. You could tell a story with that. If you could boundlessly read or understand the meaning in one of those languages, which one would it be and why? I think a really interesting one would be nature. Like being able to understand the language of nature. Like, what I mean by that is you go out into a forest and you can see what trees are growing, or what shrubs or bushes, and what can be eaten and what can't, and what has medicinal properties, and what it even means about the soil based upon what grows there, and what eats it. And there was this really interesting, what was a documentary about Yosemite National Park, where they introduced wolves back into the national park, and it actually changed the landscape and even the vegetation of the whole area, because of how the overgrowth of the deer population had eaten back so much of the shrubbery, close to the water line, that once the wolves were introduced back into this in a natural, setting, it actually completely changed the vegetation even inside the park, because the deers would instead not linger around water sources, or not have the opportunity to feast so easily on all these shrubs or whatnot. So it totally changed the landscape even, which I think is completely fascinating. So there's so much that just by being able to read nature, even in just the botanical sense of it, where you're with the things that grow, how much understanding you can have of other systems. And so I think that would be fascinating. But thank you for tagging me, Grix, etc. So sorry that it took me so long to get to your tag, but thank you so much. It was a very thoughtful and thought-provoking tag. So if you are interested in this tag, please feel free to do it. Please check out his channel. Seems like a nice, thoughtful, passionate person, so check it out. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.